Hello again. In the week of feminism, we have two readings. One is on Simone de Beauvoir, which we already read a bit, discussed. We will read more, we will discuss more. But we have also a second reading, which comes from our second Lebanese author for the semester after Gibran. And it is by a lady called Hanan El Sheikh. Now, the story that she has is a very short story, which comes from the World Reader, the big book you had, pages 1718 to 1722. So they're just 4 pages, 5 pages, very short story. And it is called A Girl Called Apple, a girl called Tufaha, in other words. Now, who is Hanan El Sheikh? Hanan El Sheikh is a Lebanese author, alive, living in London at the moment. 2 years ago, she came and visited our IS class, and she gave herself the lecture in the classroom. And we were hoping that this year she will visit us also in March. But unfortunately, with the situation we are all in now, I guess it will be difficult for her to visit us, except maybe on Zoom. She is a Lebanese author from the south, and she has become, if you see the importance of this author, when you find that her article or her small short story is in this big world HarperCollins, which includes texts like Iliad and the Odyssey and all the great works that we have read so far, you understand her importance. She writes mostly in Arabic, but she has also had most of her books translated into English. She is married, she is a Shiite from the south, married to an Orthodox from the Bekaa, and she lives in London. She was born in 1945, so she's almost 75 years old this year. But she's very petite, and if you see her, you wouldn't know her age, you know. She started as working as she did her preliminary studies in Cairo, and then she started working in An-Nahar as a journalist. And then when the war started in 1975, she left Lebanon first, and then she went to live in Saudi Arabia with her husband, who's an engineer, and then they moved to London. And it is in London that most of her books were translated and published into numerous languages. Her first book, which is called Hikayat Zahra, or the story of Zahra, which made her very important, basically discusses the sexual oppression of women in Arab countries. It also talks about how families have double standards, how the men in the family treat their sisters in a very conservative way, and yet they live their double lives and they have mistresses and girlfriends and so forth. Most of her works at the beginning, when she wrote them, were forbidden in the Arab world. They wouldn't allow them in because they were very courageous, and they would say all the things that others would not dare to say. And of course, written by a woman, she becomes more attractive to women readers, and they were afraid that she would sort of open up their minds and liberate her. Most of her works are published into English, French, Dutch, German, Korean, Spanish, Polish, Italian. The beginning, nobody would publish her books, and she published out of her own expense. And then gradually, when she became known, now every year she comes to Ma'rad al-Kitab in Lebanon, and she signs a new book. And she has a number of books like Faras al-Shaitan, the story of Zahra, Women of Sand and Myrrh, Beirut Blues, I Sweep the Sun off Rooftops. She has an interesting book called Only in London, which was Barid London, which she writes between London and Beirut during the war, and asking people to tell them the stories of Beirut, what's happening, and then she would tell them what's happening in London. And so most of these books deal with issues like the condition of women in the Arab world, the condition of how religion and society sometimes play hypocritic laws. For instance, certain religions are very open to men. They allow them a lot of free actions. But when it comes to women, for example, protection of children and the custodies are very harsh. She also talks about double standards in families, double standards in societies. Also the institution of marriage and how it is looked upon in the Arab families. I will also mention that the story that we read is not one of her very famous books, but it's a very nice article that she uses it as a prototype for the concept of marriage in most of the Arab countries. It is mostly probably in the Gulf countries, and we will see why. So it's called the story is called A Girl Called Tufaha. And of course, I don't think any of you would call your daughter Tufaha or Apple. The Americans call Apple. But in fact, when you think of the Gulf countries, you would think that Tufaha is a very rare thing. Sometimes they call her, for example, her friend is called Mauza, which is banana. There are some people who call Khasse, you know. And these are precious because we call Almaza and Fayruz and Almast and, you know, and Yaout, jewelry, you know, and these are, you know, precious stones. Now, what is the story of, I will just give you a brief, this is a very short presentation, and the story is very short, but we will take them together with Simone de Beauvoir's context. The story takes place in an oasis. An oasis is a green spot in the middle of the desert. So we are in the middle of the desert, and there is a green spot there. The people are Bedouins. They live like nomads. Nobody visits this island, this oasis, unless they are caravans who come for trade. So the caravans and the camels pass by, and the oasis families, if they have anything to sell, they will sell them or buy from these caravans, and these caravans move on. Now, in this middle of the desert lives Tufaha with her parents, father, mother, sisters, cousins, extended family. Apple doesn't have much of education, probably none. She spends her time cleaning the house with her parents, with her mother and sisters. The outing is to go to the Ain to get some water from the spring. And maybe on the way, they will meet somebody from the neighborhood or the cousins. But otherwise, the prospects of marriage are very limited. So what is their only hope for getting married for these girls who live in this oasis? Is to announce that there is a girl for marriage. And how do they do that? Whenever a girl reaches her age of puberty, between 9 and 11 and 12 and 13. In fact, when she reaches the age of reproducing and having a child, she is eligible for marriage. So the way we can advertise that we have a daughter for marriage is that the family puts up a flag on the house to announce that there is a girl for marriage. And the flags are 3 colors, red, blue, and yellow. The first 10 years between 10 and 20, it's a red flag. Between 20 and 30 is a blue flag. And between 30 and 40, it's a yellow flag. After that, there are no more flags because the girl's biological cycle stops. and she's no more eligible for marriage. So marriage is equal to producing children, and the girl's age is advertised, and her fertility scale is advertised by these flags that they put on the roof. Now, when the Faha Apple comes of age, her parents decide that they want to go up and put the flag. But Apple is very upset. And she says, I don't want you to put up the flag. And her mother is upset. She says, why? All your cousins, all your sisters, everybody in the... How come? She says, I don't want to put up the flag. And she cries and she begs her father not to go up and put up the flag. And the father says, don't you want my daughter to get married? She says, yes, I want to get married, but I don't want to put up the flag. And eventually, the father agrees and refuses and does not put up the flag. As the years go by, she keeps herself busy cleaning and weaving and carpeting and doing these things, and animal skins and camel skins. And another 10 years pass, and now that she is in the second decade, her father decides again to go up and put. And she says, please, father, and she cries and she begs him, please, father, don't put up. My daughter, don't you want to get married? Yes, I want to get married, but I don't want to put up the flag. And the years pass by, and it's time for the yellow flag, and the Faha is still at home. And the years pass by, and the caravans pass by, and eventually, when she decides to put up the flag maybe is of no more of use. So, what is the symbol of this, First of all, let us analyze what Hanan El Sheikh wants us to reflect a little bit about. What is marriage in this culture? Is it a transaction? Is it a merchandise sale? Do people sell their daughters in exchange for maybe a camel or two? Is anything like freedom of choice involved for Apple? And if Apple did not have a choice to say what she wanted, could she have at least a choice to say what she didn't want? Maybe Apple doesn't know what she wants, but she knows what she doesn't want. And she doesn't want to be married by this method. As I'm not going to go into all the details, but you read the story and tell me, why is it that Apple refuses? Is it that she's scared of marriage? Doesn't she want to leave her family? Is she afraid? Is it that she's a rebellious girl who wants to change the tradition, doesn't know how, knows the only way how, and that is by refusing to do what everybody else does? So it is interesting to look at this story and think a little bit about a few things I'd like to raise. Are you shocked by having these 3 flags put up? Could something similar happen on Facebook? Could we today have girls who advertise their availability for marriage on Facebook? And is this not very different? Another thing is that, is Apple afraid to be considered only as a commodity, as an object of exchange? Does she want to be valued for herself? Then another approach would be, suppose that Simone de Beauvoir visited Apple. You see, Apple is not an active person. She doesn't take action. The only action she takes is by not taking an action. But all this concept of the oasis is a passive. They wait for others to come in. If Apple is going to be offered chances by Simone de Beauvoir, what do you think would liberate Apple? teach her how to read and write, give her a Wi-Fi system, let her be engaged in her future, remembering the article of the Freedom of Human Rights, all girls have the right to choose their spouses. Does she have the right to choose her spouse? How would Simone de Beauvoir have changed the life of Oasis if she had passed by in one of the caravans? And if you don't have any other option, no education, no camels to sell, is this the only way of getting married? And is marriage eventually a must? Is it important for a girl to leave her family and go to another house if that new project is an unknown? No security, we don't know what's going to happen. Is it a shame for a girl to stay unmarried? Is it a shame for a girl if all her cousins got married and she reached 20 and she's not? Does she become a spinster? Does she become an old age woman? What is it that Hanan El Sheikh wants to tell us through this story? Read it, and if we have time, we can discuss it a bit on Thursday and then can go on next week. Take care. Bye-bye.